Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Tenancy Matters in BC. My name is Jaden Hildebrand, a rental property manager at 88 West Realty.
Hi, this is Shirin Saleh. I'm the owner of 88 West Realty, and we are here to delve into another policy guideline number 7, which talks about the entry to the rental property as well as the locks.
Absolutely. So whether you're a tenant wanting to ensure your privacy or a landlord trying to enter a unit, understanding the rules around locks and entries is crucial. So this policy guideline covers there's a lot of overlap between policy guideline 6 and this one. So you can watch our previous video, the link will be in the description, and then that will cover the previous guideline regarding the right to peaceful enjoyment.
Now, let's start with the first question, and this is a question that we often get from the tenants when they want to start a tenancy. They say that they want to make sure that the locks have been changed. Are they entitled to have the landlord to change the locks?
Absolutely. So a tenant can request that the owner change the locks to a property. The landlord is responsible for rekeying if they ask, but he has to make sure that the locks and keys are different than the ones that the previous tenants had, so they no longer would have access to the unit.
Okay. And then who pays for the cost?
The landlord will pay for it at the beginning. If he can prove that he has already changed the locks since the other tenants moved out, then he no longer has to change it. He has an obligation to change it the one time at the beginning between both tenants.
Yes. Now, what if there's an incident and during the tenancy, and then the tenant once again claims or wants the landlord to change the locks?
Well, then it'll be up to them. It'll be up to the tenants to change the locks, and then the tenants will have to supply the owner with a new set of keys. Okay.
So the landlord is entitled to have one set of keys always? Okay.
Yeah, usually for emergencies.
Okay. So we talked about the locks and then rekeying the locks at the beginning of a tenancy. And also I remember we touched upon the 24-hour notice by the landlord to be provided to the tenant to have access to the rental unit in the last episode. But we did not discuss the content of notice. Would any kind of notice be acceptable, or what are the things that the landlord should include into the notice?
So according to the Residential Tenancy Act, a landlord must not enter a rental unit unless an emergency exists and they have to enter to protect someone's life or property. The tenant gives permission at the time of the entry. The tenant gives permission no more than 30 days before the time of the entry. And obviously, as we talked about last episode, the landlord needs to give 24 hours notice. The landlord can also enter with notice for providing like housekeeping or related services. Or even if the tenant has abandoned the unit, which we've talked about in a way previous episode. And then also, the landlord can enter when an arbitrator decides that they are allowed to enter the unit.
So, as you said, a landlord should mention the reason that the landlord wants to have access to the unit.
And they need to provide a valid reason for access to the unit.
Okay. And also, the landlord should mention specifically what time they want to have access to the unit?
Yes.
Okay. And then also, I remember that if a landlord wants to give notice ahead of time, like say, maybe next month I'm going to come and visit the property, would that be acceptable?
Yeah, no more than 30 days.
Okay. So what do you mean by no more than 30 days?
So if you're going to schedule something, it has to be later than 24 hours and no longer than 30 days.
Okay, excellent. So, Jaden, the purpose of mentioning all these things into a notice is to have a clear communication with the tenant. And obviously, anytime a landlord is clearly states the reason that they want to come in, they want to have access to the unit, and then the date, the time, and then give enough notice to the tenant, there shouldn't be any problem. So where we see the problem that mostly happens between the tenant and the landlord is lack of communication.
Absolutely.
Landlord doesn't want to talk to tenant doesn't want to hear from the landlord. So as long as they can communicate well enough in advance, there shouldn't be any problem. Now, one incident I remember is that the tenant came back to us and said the landlord constantly wants to visit the property, and then and did not accept any of the reasons. The tenant said that the reasons are unacceptable. So what is the remedy if a tenant is facing a landlord who regularly, repeatedly wants to have access to the unit.
So drive-bys or landlord check-ins are honestly pretty common. The best thing is you can eventually not give them access, and then an arbitrator will decide whether the landlord visiting is important enough or a valid reason. But for the most part, you will always want to let your landlord in, but it can, if someone's constantly coming, if the landlord's constantly coming to your property, it can turn excessive and it can become harassment.
Yeah, absolutely. So in these cases, first of all, we recommend them that they have to amicably resolve the matter between both parties. And if they can't, then as you mentioned, the tenant has to file a dispute with RTB.
Absolutely.
And then have an arbitrator to judge between, and then hopefully the tenant will have a judgment against not having repeated visit at the rental property. Okay, this is the end of today's episode. Is there anything else that you want to mention?
Just if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them down below. We will do our best to answer as many as possible. And then don't forget to subscribe and see the link in the description for any of our previous episodes that you may have missed.